You hear the engine, long before you ever understand the airplane. It begins as a distant rumble across a cold morning airfield, a mechanical heartbeat echoing through rows of canvas tents. To everyone else, it's simply another aircraft preparing for another mission. To you, it's the sound that will divide your life into two parts. Before your first flight, and everything that comes after. History remembers the fighter pilots, the aces, the fearless men painted across recruitment posters, the smiling faces standing beside polished aircraft with victory markings beneath the cockpit. Photographs captured confidence. Newsreels celebrated courage. Movies turned them into legends. What those stories rarely show is what happened after the camera stopped rolling. The shaking hands, the sleepless nights, the empty bunks that quietly disappeared from the barracks. The pilots who climbed into their aircraft wondering, not whether they would win, but whether the engine would still be running an hour from now. A World War II fighter was a remarkable machine. Fast, powerful, capable of climbing thousands of feet into the sky in only minutes. But it was also built under enormous pressure. Factories worked around the clock. Mechanics repaired battle damage overnight. Engines ran at their limits. Every mission asked more from the aircraft than it had been designed to give. Every takeoff depended on thousands of parts working perfectly. If just one failed, gravity would take over. You don't become a pilot because you're fearless. You become one because your eyesight is good. Your reflexes are quick. Your instructors believe you might survive long enough to justify the fuel spent training you. Many of the men standing beside you were farmers only months earlier. Mechanics, teachers, students, young men who had barely learned how to shave every morning before learning how to fight a war from 15,000 feet above the ground. War has little patience for experience. It creates it, or buries it. Standing on the flight line for the first time, the aircraft looks magnificent. Sunlight catches the metal skin. The propeller sits perfectly still. The wings seem impossibly graceful. From a distance, it looks less like a weapon, and more like freedom. Then you climb inside. The cockpit is cramped. The seat feels more like sheet metal than furniture. The smell of fuel, hot oil, canvas, rubber, and old sweat fills the tiny compartment. Levers crowd your knees. Gauges cover the instrument panel. Switches seem to multiply every time you look away. The canopy closes above your head with a heavy metallic click. Suddenly, the airplane doesn't feel graceful anymore. It feels like a machine that expects perfection from someone who has barely learned its language. The instructor told you flying would become second nature. He neglected to mention how long the first nature lasts. The pounding heart, the dry mouth, the moment your hands hesitate above unfamiliar controls. The realization that once the wheels leave the ground, there is nowhere to pull over. No roadside, no emergency lane, only sky, and whatever waits inside it. Outside, the crew chief gives you a thumbs up. A simple gesture, one you've seen countless times. Today, it feels strangely final. He steps away. The propeller begins to spin. Slowly at first, then so fast it disappears into a shimmering circle. The engine roars to life. The entire aircraft vibrates beneath you. Every bolt, every rivet, every cable. The machine is awake. And in only a few moments, it will ask you to trust it completely. People often imagine pilots feared the enemy most. The fighters, the anti-aircraft guns, the missiles that hadn't yet been invented but would someday dominate the skies. The truth was often much simpler. Many pilots feared mechanical failure, bad weather, running out of fuel, becoming lost above unfamiliar countryside. Because long before another pilot ever found you, the sky itself was already trying to kill you. You take one final look down the runway. Behind you, the airfield. Ahead, the unknown. You tighten your grip on the control stick. Take one slow breath and ease the throttle forward. The aircraft begins to roll. Faster, then faster still. The ground trembles beneath the wheels. The engine howls. Your heartbeat somehow becomes even louder. In only a few seconds, The Earth you've trusted your entire life will disappear beneath you, and you'll discover something every wartime pilot eventually learned. The greatest danger wasn't learning how to fly. It was learning how to come back down. No one hands you an airplane on your first day. First, they take away almost everything that made you comfortable. Sleep, privacy, confidence, and any illusion that becoming a pilot will be glamorous. Your mornings begin long before sunrise. A whistle pierces the darkness. Then comes the shouting. Within seconds, canvas tents erupt with movement. Boots scrape against wooden floors. Metal cups clatter to the ground. Someone fumbles for a jacket. Someone else is already sprinting outside. You have barely opened your eyes, and you're already behind. The air is bitterly cold. Your breath hangs in front of your face as you rush into formation. Rows of young men stand shoulder to shoulder. Some are barely 18. Others left jobs, universities, or family farms only weeks ago. Now everyone looks exactly the same. Hair cropped short, uniforms stiff, faces still carrying the uncertainty of civilians pretending to be soldiers. The instructor walks slowly down the line. He says very little. He doesn't need to. One glance is enough to find an unpolished boot, an unbuttoned collar, or a recruit standing half an inch out of place. Mistakes are never ignored. Sometimes they're corrected with words. More often, with another hour of drills. You quickly discover that military discipline has very little to do with airplanes. Before anyone trusts you with an engine producing over 1,000 horsepower, they first want to know if they can trust you to follow simple instructions. Can you arrive on time? Can you remain calm under pressure? Can you remember procedures without hesitation? Because if you forget, make the same mistakes. He straps himself in, looks over the cockpit one final time, then simply says, "Don't fight the airplane." You nod confidently, even though you're not entirely sure what that means. The engine starts with a violent cough. The propeller becomes a spinning blur. Immediately, conversation becomes impossible. Every vibration travels through the seat into your spine. The smell of fuel mixes with warm oil. The aircraft feels alive. Not comfortable. Not friendly. Alive. As though it has its own personality and hasn't yet decided whether it likes you. The runway stretches ahead. Long. Flat. Unforgiving. Your instructor signals you forward. Hands trembling slightly. You ease the throttle ahead. The aircraft begins rolling. Faster than expected. The rudder pedals feel awkward beneath your boots. Every correction seems either too much or not enough. The airplane wanders gently from side to side. You fight the urge to overreact. Small movements. Your instructor shouts through the headset. Feel the airplane. Easy advice. Difficult to follow. Then, almost without warning, the bumps beneath the wheels disappear. The vibration changes. The ground falls away. The trainer lifts into the morning sky. For the first time in your life, nothing exists beneath you except air. Your stomach tightens. Your hands grip the control stick harder than necessary. Every instinct tells you this is wrong. Human beings weren't meant to be here. Yet somehow, the airplane continues climbing. Steadily, gracefully, as though this impossible thing is the most natural act in the world. The countryside shrinks beneath you. Roads become thin ribbons. Farmhouses become tiny squares. People disappear completely. Only then do you understand what makes flying so intoxicating. For a few brief moments, the war seems very far away. The world looks peaceful from above, almost untouched. It is a beautiful illusion, one that won't last, because before long, these same skies will fill with smoke, tracer rounds, enemy fighters, and young men discovering that the hardest part of learning to fly was never leaving the ground. It was surviving everything waiting above it. Training ends quietly. There isn't a dramatic ceremony, no grand speech, no moment where someone places a hand on your shoulder and tells you you're ready. Because the truth is, almost no one ever feels ready. One morning, your name appears on the assignment board. Beside it, an aircraft number. That's all. No congratulations. No applause. Just a serial number painted on a machine waiting at the far end of the flight line. You stare at it for a moment longer than necessary. Somehow, those few letters and numbers feel heavier than every examination you've already passed. The aircraft is no longer a trainer. It's faster, more powerful, far less forgiving. Depending on where you're stationed, it might be a sleek British fighter built for speed, a rugged American workhorse designed to escort bombers, or a German interceptor expected to climb toward enemy formations in minutes. Different nations flew different machines, different engines, different instruments, different strengths and weaknesses. But every pilot experienced the same realization the first time they approached one alone. This airplane was no longer shared with an instructor. Every decision inside the cockpit would now belong to you. The crew chief is already waiting. His hands are stained permanently black from oil and grease. His uniform looks older than he does. He circles the aircraft one final time, tightening a panel, checking a tire, wiping his hands on a rag that stopped being clean months ago. He notices you watching. She'll fly. It's impossible to tell whether he's reassuring you or simply stating a fact. You begin the inspection exactly as you were taught. Slowly, methodically, you check the propeller for damage. Run your hand along the leading edge of each wing. Inspect the landing gear. Look for fuel leaks, loose panels, missing fasteners, anything unusual. The checklist is familiar now, but familiarity doesn't eliminate doubt. Every item you inspect brings the same quiet question. What if I miss something? The cockpit feels different without an instructor behind you. Larger somehow, yet much lonelier. You settle into the seat. Fasten the harness. Adjust the rudder pedals. Reach instinctively towards switches you've repeated hundreds of times in training. Battery. Fuel selector. Mixture. Throttle cracked open. Magnetos. Primer. Each movement feels rehearsed. Yet today, your hands are noticeably slower. Not because you've forgotten. Because today, mistakes have consequences. The canopy slides shut. Outside sounds disappear. The bustling airfield fades beneath layers of glass and metal. For the first time, you are completely alone. The tiny cockpit becomes your entire world. Everything you need to survive the next several hours fits within arm's reach. Maps folded beside your leg. Compass trembling slightly. Altimeter resting at 0. Oil pressure gauge waiting silently. The radio hisses with bursts of static. Somewhere nearby, another engine starts. Then another. Soon the entire airfield vibrates with synchronized power. You glance across the flight line. Other pilots climb into their aircraft. Some move confidently. Others hesitate before closing the canopy. Everyone is pretending not to be nervous. It's an unspoken agreement. Confidence is contagious. So is fear. No one wants to spread the second one. The starter engages. The propeller jerks once, twice, then explodes into motion. The engine coughs violently before settling into a deep mechanical growl. The entire aircraft trembles beneath you. Not violently, almost impatiently, as though eager to leave the ground. You watch the engine instruments carefully. Oil pressure rises. Cylinder temperatures begin climbing. Everything appears normal. For now, taxiing proves harder than flying. Ever looked? The long nose blocks most of your forward view. You weave gently left and right just to see what's ahead. Mechanics wave you through. Another fighter passes slowly in the opposite direction. Its pilot gives a brief nod. Neither of you smiles. There is an understanding between military pilots. Every departure carries an unspoken question. Will we both return? You reach the runway threshold. One by one, the aircraft ahead begin disappearing into the sky. Each leaves behind only swirling dust and fading engine noise. Soon, it's your turn. The tower clears you for departure. You take one final breath. Throttle forward. The engine roars with astonishing force. Acceleration presses you into the seat. The tail rises. The controls become lighter. Faster. Faster still. Then, almost imperceptibly, the wheels lose contact with the earth. This time, there's no instructor. No reassuring voice. No second pair of hands ready to recover from a mistake. Every adjustment is yours. Every climb, every turn, every landing, every decision. Below you, the airfield quickly becomes a patchwork of tiny buildings and narrow runways. Ahead, only open sky. You finally understand why experienced pilots rarely celebrated earning their wings. Graduation wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning. Because now, the real lessons would be taught by weather, mechanical failures, enemy aircraft, and luck. Above all, luck. The first operational mission begins long before the airplane leaves the runway. It begins with a map, pinned to a wooden wall inside a drafty briefing room. Red arrows, blue arrows, thin black lines marking rivers and railways. To the officers, they're symbols. To you, they're places where people are already fighting, places you'll soon fly over. The room is unusually quiet. Dozens of pilots sit shoulder to shoulder, clutching notebooks they won't need. Nobody is writing. Everyone is listening. The intelligence officer points toward the target. Weather, conditions, expected altitude, enemy activity, fuel calculations, radio frequencies, emergency landing fields. The briefing lasts less than 30 minutes. It feels like 30 seconds. You leave knowing exactly where you're supposed to go, and almost nothing about what you'll find when you get there. Outside, the mechanics are already preparing the aircraft. Fuel trucks snake between the rows of fighters. Armorers load ammunition into machine guns. Belts of gleaming cartridges disappear into the wings. Bomb crews secure payloads beneath larger aircraft. Every man on the ground works quickly, because every minute spent waiting is another minute the enemy has to prepare. You pause beside your airplane. Yesterday, it looked impressive. Today, it feels fragile. The aluminum skin is surprisingly thin. Only a few millimeters separate you from freezing air rushing past at hundreds of miles per hour. The cockpit glass suddenly seems less like armor, and more like a window. You realize something unsettling. The airplane isn't designed to protect you. It's designed to fly. Protection comes second. Sometimes, not at all. The engine starts cleanly. A welcome sound. Some mornings it doesn't. Engines foul their spark plugs. Fuel lines clog. Hydraulic systems leak. Even before combat begins, machines fail. A surprising number of wartime aircraft never reached the battlefield at all. Mechanical problems claimed pilots almost as efficiently as enemy fire. The signal comes. One aircraft rolls forward, then another, then yours. The runway stretches endlessly ahead. Throttle forward. The engine answers with a deafening roar. The tail lifts. The aircraft gathers speed. Within seconds, you're airborne again. Only this time, you're not climbing toward a training area. You're climbing toward war. Formation flying feels completely different now. The instructor's aircraft is gone. Instead, you're surrounded by other operational pilots. They hold their positions with remarkable precision. Each airplane seems suspended on invisible strings. Tiny adjustments, barely noticeable. Months of practice condensed into instinct. You work constantly just to remain in place. The sky may appear empty from the ground, but inside a military formation, there is almost no room for error. The climb continues. 5,000 feet, 10,000, 15,000. The temperature drops rapidly. Frost begins creeping across the edges of the canopy. Your oxygen mask grows increasingly important. Without it, clear thinking becomes difficult. Simple decisions become slow. The higher you climb, the less forgiving the atmosphere becomes. Human beings were never meant to live here. They merely learned how. The landscape below transforms. Roads become threads. Forests resemble patches of dark velvet. Entire towns shrink until they're no larger than a handful of buildings. Smoke rises from distant factories. Railway lines stretch toward the horizon. Somewhere below, people continue ordinary lives. Working, cooking, walking to school, completely unaware that dozens of armed aircraft are passing silently above them. The radio crackles, mostly static. Occasionally a clear instruction. Formation adjustments. Navigation updates. Brief acknowledgements. Radio discipline is strict. Nobody wastes words. In combat, a few unnecessary seconds spent talking could cause someone to miss the warning that saves their life. Clouds drift across your path. At first they seem peaceful. Soft white islands floating effortlessly through the sky. Then your formation enters one. Visibility disappears instantly. The world outside becomes nothing but gray mist. You can no longer see the horizon. The aircraft beside you vanishes. Only your instruments remain. Artificial horizon, compass, altimeter, engine gauges. You suddenly understand why instructors insisted you trust them. Your senses are lying. Your instruments are not. The formation emerges from the cloud moments later. Sunlight floods the cockpit. The airplanes reappear almost exactly where they should be. No one says anything, but every pilot knows how easily that cloud could have scattered the entire formation. Weather has no allegiance. It threatens everyone equally. Then, someone calls out over the radio. Not loudly, not urgently. Simply, flak ahead. You lean forward instinctively. At first, you see nothing. Then, tiny black puffs begin appearing far ahead, almost beautiful against the pale blue sky, like little clouds blooming in perfect circles. The veteran pilots don't admire them. They adjust their harnesses, grip the controls more tightly, because those harmless-looking bursts are anti-aircraft shells. Each black cloud contains fragments of steel traveling faster than sound. The explosion doesn't need to strike your airplane directly. It only needs to happen close enough. The first bursts remain distant. Then they begin moving closer. Closer still. Suddenly, one explodes just below your formation. The airplane jolts violently from the shock wave. You instinctively duck, even though there's nowhere to hide. The aircraft continues flying. The engine still runs. Your hands tighten around the control stick. You hear your own breathing inside the oxygen mask. Slow, controlled, or at least, you hope it sounds that way. No enemy fighters have appeared. Not yet. No bullets have struck your wings. Not yet. And already, you understand something every experienced pilot learns sooner or later. Reaching the battlefield was never guaranteed. Sometimes, the sky itself claimed you first. The first time you see an enemy aircraft, you almost mistake it for one of your own. At 15,000 feet, every airplane is little more than a silhouette, a dark shape moving against an endless blue sky. Distance hides details. Speed hides intentions. Only experience tells pilots the difference. And experience is something you're still earning. The radio crackles sharply. Bandits. Just one word. Every pilot in the formation understands it immediately. Enemy fighters. Somewhere ahead. Your eyes sweep across the sky. Left. Right. Above. Below. The instructors always said a fighter pilot spends more time looking than flying. Now you understand why. The greatest danger is rarely the airplane you can already see. It's the one you haven't noticed yet. Then, there they are. Tiny black dots. Almost impossible to distinguish at first. Growing larger every second. Closing at a combined speed of nearly 700 miles per hour. There is no dramatic countdown. No music. No speeches. Only two groups of young men hurtling toward one another, each hoping someone else makes the first mistake. The formation breaks apart. Almost instantly, what had been an orderly procession becomes organized chaos. Pairs of aircraft peel away. Some climb sharply. Others dive toward the sun. Everyone searches for position, height, speed, an advantage measured in seconds. You shove the throttle forward. The engine roars. The propeller bites into the air. Your aircraft surges ahead. The control stick feels heavier now. Every movement requires more effort. The airplane responds with surprising violence. This isn't the smooth flying you practiced during training. This is survival. A fighter flashes across your canopy, too fast to identify clearly. Only a blur of camouflage and spinning propeller. You instinctively turn after it. Your instructor's voice echoes somewhere deep inside your memory. Don't chase the airplane. Predict where it will be. Simple advice. Almost impossible to follow. The sky becomes crowded. Aircraft crossing in every direction. Some climbing, some diving, some trailing long ribbons of smoke. It's impossible to keep track of everyone. Combat isn't a duel. It's dozens of individual fights unfolding simultaneously. Each pilot sees only a tiny piece of the battle. No one sees the whole picture. Then, you hear it. Not through the radio. Through the airframe itself. A sudden metallic clang. Another. Then another. For one terrifying moment, your mind refuses to accept what you're hearing. Bullets. Someone is firing at you. Training takes over before fear does. You bank hard. The horizon rolls 90 degrees. The earth swings sideways beneath your wing. Your stomach lurches as the aircraft drops into a steep dive. Gravity presses you against the harness. The engine screams at full power. Behind you, more tracers slice through the empty space your aircraft occupied only moments earlier. Bright orange streaks. Beautiful. Until you remember each one carries enough energy to tear through aluminum. Or flesh. You don't know who fired. You don't look back. Looking back costs time. Time gets pilots killed. Instead, you keep moving. Never straight. Never level. Every second unpredictable. Because predictability is exactly what an enemy pilot wants. The forces build rapidly. You pull harder on the control stick. The aircraft responds immediately. Your body suddenly feels twice as heavy. Then 3 times. Blood begins draining from your head. Your vision narrows slightly around the edges. The instructors warned you about this. High G turns. Human bodies have limits. Airplanes often reach them before people do. The enemy overshoots. Just for an instant. You finally see the aircraft clearly. Its markings flash across your windscreen before disappearing again. You instinctively follow. Not because you're eager. Because now, it's either him or you. Your thumb rests lightly on the trigger. You hesitate. Just for a fraction of a second. Until now, all your targets have been painted circles. Canvas sleeves towed behind other airplanes. Ground markers. Practice. This target has a pilot inside. Someone not much older than you. Someone who also woke before dawn. Someone who probably received a letter from home recently. Someone who believes he's the hero. Exactly as you believe you are. War has an extraordinary ability to convince 2 strangers that they must kill each other before ever exchanging a single word. The opportunity disappears. The enemy fighter rolls away sharply. Another aircraft crosses between you. You lose sight of him entirely. The sky swallows airplanes almost as quickly as it reveals them. 1 second they're directly ahead. The next, they're gone. The battle continues for what feels like hours. In reality, barely 10 minutes have passed. 10 minutes of climbing, diving, scanning, turning, listening, hoping, wondering whether the next burst of gunfire carries your name. Then, the radio finally comes alive. Rally. 1 word. The surviving aircraft begin drifting back toward one another. Some are missing. No one asks where they are. Not yet. Everyone already suspects the answer. As the formation turns toward home, you glance behind your shoulder one final time. The sky looks peaceful again. Empty. Almost innocent. Only the faint trails of smoke twisting toward the earth betray what happened there minutes earlier. From the ground, someone might look up and think it had been a beautiful day to fly. Only the pilots know. The sky had become a battlefield. And this was only the beginning. Long before enemy fighters become your greatest fear, there is flak. The name comes from the German word Flugabwehrkanonen. Anti-aircraft guns built for one purpose: to reach into the sky and pull airplanes back to Earth. Unlike fighter pilots, flak crews never have to find you. They already know where you're going. Factories, railway yards, bridges, airfields. Every important target is surrounded by batteries of heavy guns pointing permanently toward the sky. If your mission matters, you can safely assume the guns are already waiting. You rarely hear them fire. They're too far below. Instead, you see the explosions first. Tiny black clouds suddenly appearing in the distance. almost elegant against the bright morning sky. For a brief moment, they resemble harmless puffs of smoke. Then another appears, and another. Soon, dozens begin blooming around your formation. The sky itself seems to be coming apart. Each black burst is the detonation of a shell. The explosion throws thousands of razor-sharp steel fragments outward in every direction. The shell doesn't need to hit your airplane. It only needs to explode close enough. At combat altitude, that's often more than enough. Your bomber formation keeps flying. It has to. Changing course every few seconds would only scatter the aircraft and destroy the protection they provide one another. Steady, predictable, disciplined. Those are the rules. Unfortunately, they're also exactly what the gunners on the ground are hoping for. The first explosions remain comfortably distant. You watch them with detached curiosity, almost scientifically. They're close, but not close enough. Then, one erupts level with your wingtip. The aircraft shudders violently. Your entire body jumps inside the harness. Not because you've been hit, but because the blast wave alone has shaken the airplane. The realization arrives instantly. The next shell could be closer. You grip the control stick harder. Not because it helps, because your hands need somewhere to put the fear. Around you, the formation continues flying. Nobody panics. Nobody dives away. Veteran crews know something you don't. Panic almost never improves your odds. The explosions become continuous. One after another, black smoke fills the air. Visibility shrinks. Every few seconds, another violent shock wave rattles the aircraft. Tiny metallic sounds echo somewhere behind you. Fragments striking the fuselage. Some bounce harmlessly away. Others don't. You have no idea which is which. Then, you smell something. Burning insulation. Not much. Just enough to notice. Your eyes race across the engine instruments. Oil pressure. Normal. Cylinder temperature. Normal. Fuel pressure. Normal. Nothing appears wrong. Yet, your heartbeat refuses to slow. Sky returns to its familiar pale blue. Quiet. Almost peaceful. You let out a breath you hadn't realized you'd been holding. Only then do you inspect the aircraft. A jagged hole has appeared in one wing. Several instruments have stopped working. The canopy bears fresh cracks. Small pieces of shrapnel are embedded in the fuselage just inches from your seat. You run your hand across one of them. Cold steel. No larger than a coin. Small enough to fit in your palm. Large enough to have ended everything. People often imagine aerial combat as dramatic dogfights between skilled pilots. Sometimes it was. But many wartime airmen never even saw the person trying to kill them. They simply flew through a sky filled with invisible calculations, where strangers on the ground estimated speed, altitude, distance, and hoped mathematics would succeed where eyesight could not. Sometimes it did. Sometimes luck flew home instead. People imagine a pilot's life as a constant series of dogfights. Take off, fight, land, repeat. The reality is far slower, far quieter, and in many ways, far more difficult. Because most of your time isn't spent flying. It's spent waiting. Waiting for the weather to clear. Waiting for replacement parts. Waiting for tomorrow's briefing. Waiting for your name to appear on the operations board. Or waiting for friends who should have landed hours ago. Waiting becomes its own kind of battle. The moment your aircraft rolls to a stop after a mission, the mechanics are already climbing onto the wings. They don't ask how you're feeling. They're listening to the engine, looking for bullet holes, checking hydraulic lines, fuel leaks, oil stains, anything that might keep the aircraft from flying again tomorrow. Sometimes they find dozens of holes. Sometimes they find none. Neither guarantees you'll survive the next sortie. You climb awkwardly from the cockpit. Your legs feel strangely weak. Not because you've been injured, because your body has spent the last several hours flooded with adrenaline. Now, it's finally beginning to let go. The ground feels unfamiliar, almost unstable. You hadn't realized how tightly you were gripping the controls until you tried to unclench your hands. Your fingers ache. Someone hands you a mug of coffee. It's lukewarm, thin, barely recognizable as coffee. You drink it anyway. Not because it tastes good, because it gives your hands something to hold. The debrief begins almost immediately. A cramped room. Maps spread across wooden tables. Intelligence officers asking questions. How many enemy fighters? Where? What altitude? Did you see smoke from the target? Was the bridge destroyed? Did flak seem heavier than yesterday? You answer as accurately as you can. Sometimes you're certain. Often, you're guessing. Combat has a way of scrambling memory. Entire minutes disappear. Events blur together. You remember flashes, sounds, moments, not timelines. After the reports are finished, everyone drifts back toward the barracks. The conversations begin quietly. Someone jokes about a rough landing. Another complains about the food. A mechanic curses an engine that refused to cooperate. It almost sounds normal. Almost. Until someone notices an empty bunk. Nobody asks where its owner is. Everyone already knows. If he had landed, he'd already be here. His jacket would still be hanging from the same nail. His boots would still be beside the bed. Instead, his space remains untouched. For now, tomorrow someone else may be assigned to it. War wastes very little. Letters from home become precious. Mail arrives whenever transport allows. Sometimes every few days. Sometimes weeks apart. You recognize familiar handwriting immediately. Your mother's careful script. Your father's shorter notes. A younger sister talking about school. Friends describing ordinary lives that suddenly feel impossibly distant. The letters rarely mention fear. They ask simple questions. Are you eating enough? Are you staying warm? When will you come home? You wish the answers were simple too. You begin writing replies. Then stop halfway through. How do you explain a sky filled with exploding steel? How do you describe watching airplanes disappear into clouds and never return? Instead, you write about weather, food, the scenery. You tell them you're doing fine. You hope that's true. Sleep becomes unpredictable. Some nights you're too exhausted to stay awake. Other nights, you're wide awake despite complete exhaustion. The sound of engines continues long after they've stopped. Every unexpected noise snaps your eyes open. Someone coughing, a truck starting, a door slamming. For a moment, your mind believes it's another scramble, another mission, another morning. The dreams don't help. Sometimes you're flying again. Sometimes the engine fails. Sometimes you keep falling. Long after you should have reached the ground. You wake before impact. Heart racing. Tents silent around you. The war has found a way to follow you into sleep. Weather controls your life more than generals do. Heavy rain turns runways into mud. Fog hides mountains. Ice forms across wings. Strong winds scatter formations. Some mornings the missions are canceled before breakfast. Relief spreads quietly through the camp. No one celebrates. Because canceled today often means flying tomorrow. Maintenance crews never stop working. Even at night, lanterns glow beneath open engine panels. Mechanics replace damaged control cables, patch bullet holes, change spark plugs, adjust propellers. Most never receive medals. Yet without them, very few pilots would ever leave the ground. Every successful mission belongs to more people than history usually remembers. As the weeks pass, new faces arrive. Young pilots fresh from training. They remind you of yourself. The way they stare at the aircraft. The nervous confidence. The careful questions they try not to ask. You answer when you can. You avoid answering others. Some lessons can only be learned in the air. One evening, you sit outside the barracks watching the sun disappear behind the runway. The aircraft stands silently in long rows. Their engines finally quiet. For a few precious minutes, the war almost feels paused. Almost. Then a jeep pulls into camp. An orderly steps out carrying tomorrow's flight roster. Every conversation stops. Every eye follows him. Because somewhere on that single sheet of paper is a list of men who will climb back into the sky at dawn. Maybe your name. Maybe someone else's. Either way, everyone understands the same truth. You never really finished today's mission. You only survived long enough to begin preparing for tomorrow's. From the ground, Bombers look unstoppable. Huge wings, multiple engines, rows of machine guns, dozens of men working together inside a single aircraft. To civilians watching them disappear over the horizon, they seem almost indestructible. The crews know better. Every bomber is simply a larger target. Unlike fighter pilots, you cannot rely on speed. Your aircraft is heavy, loaded with thousands of pounds of fuel, bombs, ammunition, equipment. Every extra pound makes climbing slower, turning wider, escaping harder. Once airborne, there are very few sudden maneuvers available to you. You go where the mission demands, at the speed the airplane allows. A bomber crew is less like a group of pilots, and more like the crew of a ship. The pilot keeps the aircraft flying. The co-pilot shares the workload. A navigator studies maps and stars. A bombardier watches the target. Radio operators maintain contact with home. Engineers monitor 4 roaring engines simultaneously. Gunners scan every direction for fighters. Each person has one job. If even one fails, everyone pays the price. The inside of the aircraft is nothing like people imagine. There are no spacious cabins, no comfortable seats, only narrow metal walkways, sharp edges, exposed wiring, hydraulic pipes running along the walls, the constant smell of fuel, warm engine oil, burned metal. Every surface vibrates, every bolt hums. Conversation is impossible without an intercom. Even then, voices compete against engines producing thousands of horsepower only a few feet away. The temperature changes dramatically with altitude. At lower levels, the bomber can feel surprisingly warm. Climb high enough, and the warmth disappears. The air outside falls far below freezing. Metal becomes painfully cold to touch. Moisture freezes across windows. Your breath forms tiny clouds inside the oxygen mask. Without heated flight clothing, frostbite becomes a genuine possibility before reaching the target. Some crews completed missions with fingers so numb. They struggled to unfasten their harnesses after landing. Hours pass before anything happens. That's one of the strangest parts of bomber operations. People imagine constant action. Instead, there is endless routine. You monitor engine gauges, check fuel consumption, adjust mixture controls, confirm headings, listen to engines that all sound almost identical. When everything is working, the flight becomes hypnotic. The propellers spin endlessly. Clouds drift beneath the wings. The landscape crawls slowly below. For long stretches, it almost feels peaceful. Then, someone spots contrails. Thin white lines stretching across the distant sky. Too straight to be clouds. Too deliberate to be anything else. The intercom crackles. Aircraft, 11 o'clock. Immediately, every gunner begins searching. The pilots hold formation. No sudden turns. No unnecessary movement. A lone bomber is vulnerable. A formation gives everyone overlapping fields of fire. Breaking apart would only make the enemy's job easier. The distant specks grow larger. Slowly at first, then alarmingly fast. Fighter aircraft. They almost always begin from above. Altitude is energy. Energy becomes speed. Speed becomes surprise. Within moments, there, diving directly toward the formation. The first attack happens so quickly, your eyes barely follow it. A fighter flashes through the bombers. Machine guns firing continuously. Bright tracers streak across the sky. Then it's gone, already climbing for another pass. Entire mission begin. Everyone knows the aircraft has become predictable. So does every anti-aircraft gun below. No one speaks. The pilot resists every instinct to maneuver. The bombardier peers through the bomb sight. Tiny corrections. Left. Right. Hold steady. The aircraft seems frozen in the sky. The silence feels unbearable. Then, the command. Bombs away. A heavy shudder passes through the bomber. Thousands of pounds suddenly vanish beneath the aircraft. The nose lifts ever so slightly. The airplane feels lighter. Almost relieved. Only now can the pilot finally turn for home. The journey back is rarely easier. Enemy fighters still hunt. Flak batteries still fire. Engines are older now. Fuel tanks are lighter. Some aircraft have fallen behind. Others never appear at all. The formation that returns home is almost never the same one that departed. Every empty position tells its own story, one that often ends far from any runway. People often remember the bombers, the machines, the photographs, the formations stretching across the sky. But inside every aircraft were ordinary young men, cold, exhausted, terrified, trying to stay awake, trying to do their jobs, trying to believe that if they survived today's mission, they might somehow survive the next one too. Every pilot tells himself the same thing. It won't happen to me. The engine will keep running. The controls will keep responding. The aircraft will bring me home. It's an understandable belief. You couldn't climb into an airplane every morning if you truly expected it to fall from the sky. But war has a way of dismantling certainty, one mission at a time. It usually begins with something small. A warning light, a strange vibration, the smell of smoke, oil splattered across the windscreen, an engine running just a little rougher than it should. At first, you convince yourself it's nothing. Airplanes make strange noises. Engines cough. Instruments fail. Not every problem ends in disaster. You hope. This is one of those times. Then comes the sound every pilot fears. A violent impact. Not the sharp crack of machine gun fire. Something heavier. A dull metallic thud that echoes through the entire aircraft. The control stick jerks violently in your hands. The airplane rolls without permission. Warning lights bloom across the instrument panel. The engine begins coughing. This time, you don't need anyone to tell you. You've been hit. Training immediately takes over. Check the gauges. Oil pressure falling. Engine temperature rising. Fuel pressure fluctuating. Smoke begins creeping around the edge of the cowling. You push the throttle. The engine responds, but only reluctantly. Its steady roar has become an uneven growl, like a runner trying to finish a race on broken legs. You report the damage over the radio. The reply comes back almost instantly. Can you make it home? You don't answer immediately, because you honestly don't know. The airplane starts losing altitude, slowly at first, barely noticeable. Then, faster. You pull back on the stick. Nothing. The nose continues sinking. The damaged engine can no longer produce enough power. Every mile toward home suddenly feels impossibly far away. You search the landscape below. Fields, forests, roads, small villages. Somewhere beneath you, there might be a place to crash land. Or, there might not. The map no longer matters. Only survival does. Smoke thickens inside the cockpit. Your eyes begin watering. The smell changes. Burning oil, hot metal, electrical insulation. None of those smells belong inside an airplane. You remember what every instructor repeated countless times. Fly the aircraft for as long as you can, because the moment you leave it, you're trusting something even less predictable. The parachute. Modern parachutes inspire confidence. World War II parachutes didn't. They were reliable most of the time. But most of the time is an unsettling phrase when your life depends entirely upon silk, cord, and careful packing done by someone you probably never met. Pilots inspected them constantly, adjusted straps, checked buckles, not because they expected to jump, because they hoped never to need them. The engine finally quits. Completely. The sudden silence is almost shocking. For hours, your world has been filled with vibration, noise, power. Now, only rushing wind remains. The propeller continues spinning, but no longer under its own power. It turns helplessly in the airflow, a dead weight attached to the nose. The aircraft begins gliding. For a few precious moments, it still flies, not because it wants to, because gravity allows it. You lose altitude with every passing second. There are no more decisions left to postpone. Either land or leave. You release the harness. It feels strangely wrong. For hours, those straps kept you alive. Now you deliberately remove them. You slide back the canopy. Instantly, the cockpit fills with deafening wind. Cold air slams into your face. Maps disappear into the sky behind you. Loose papers whip violently around the cockpit before vanishing forever. The peaceful cabin you've occupied all mission becomes an open storm. Your heart pounds so hard. You wonder if you can hear it over the wind. One hand grips the edge of the cockpit. The other steadies your body. You look down. Something every instructor warned you never to do. The ground appears impossibly far away. Fields stretch to the horizon. Roads resemble threads. Tiny buildings that the landscape. Everything below looks peaceful. Until you remember. You're about to jump into it. Every instinct in your body screams the same command. Stay inside the airplane. Human beings are not meant to leap willingly into empty air. Your mind understands the aircraft is dying. Your instincts don't care. Inside the cockpit, there is still something beneath your feet. Outside, there is nothing. Then, you jump. Not gracefully, not heroically. You simply throw yourself clear. For one brief instant, there is complete silence. No cockpit, no engine, no controls, only rushing air. The airplane begins drifting away beside you. Oddly calm, almost graceful. The machine that carried you through countless hours of sky now continues alone. You watch it for only a moment. Then instinct returns. Count. 1, 2, 3. You pull the ripcord. Nothing happens. For half a heartbeat, terror consumes everything. Then, a violent jolt. The harness slams against your shoulders. Your descent changes instantly. The roaring wind fades. The parachute blossoms overhead. White silk stretches against the sky. You are alive. For now, suspended beneath the canopy. The war suddenly becomes quiet. Almost peaceful. You drift slowly toward the earth. Below, the countryside moves lazily beneath your feet. In the distance, you see your aircraft strike the ground. A brief flash. A plume of black smoke. The machine is gone. The mission is over. Yours isn't. Because now you face another question. One every downed pilot dreaded. Whose ground are you about to land on? The parachute landing lasts only a few seconds. The consequences can last the rest of your life. You hit the ground harder than expected. The landing isn't elegant. Your knees buckle. You tumble sideways into a field, the parachute collapsing around you like an enormous white blanket. For a moment, you simply lie there, listening, breathing, making sure everything still works. Your arms, your legs, your ribs. Nothing appears broken. Pain radiates through your ankles. But pain is a luxury. It means you're still alive. Training returns almost immediately. Get out of the parachute. Quickly. A fully open canopy is impossible to miss. Against green fields or snowy forests, the white silk can be seen for miles. You struggle free from the harness, gathering the fabric as quickly as trembling hands allow. The wind keeps catching it, trying to spread it open again. Every wasted second feels dangerous. The sky above is suddenly empty. Only minutes ago it had been filled with engines, gunfire, and explosions. Now, there is only silence. You look up instinctively, hoping to see friendly aircraft circling overhead. There are none. The formation has already disappeared beyond the horizon. The war moves quickly. It cannot stop for one missing pilot. You finally take stock of what remains. Your sidearm, a small survival kit, a compass, perhaps a map, if it wasn't blown away during the jump, a few emergency rations. Not much else. Everything you owned only minutes earlier is now burning somewhere across the countryside. Then comes the question you've been avoiding. Where are you? You know the mission. You know the general direction home. But from the ground, everything looks different. Rivers twist unexpectedly. Roads divide and disappear. Forests stretch farther than they seemed from the air. The landmarks you memorized at 20,000 feet suddenly feel unfamiliar. You hear voices, distant, carried by the wind. You freeze. Your breathing becomes almost painfully slow. You cannot understand the words. But you don't need to. Someone has seen the parachute. A pilot on the ground is astonishingly vulnerable. In the air, Your aircraft could travel hundreds of miles per hour. Here, you move no faster than any ordinary man. Your flying boots aren't made for long marches. Your flight suit catches on branches. The parachute harness still hangs awkwardly from your shoulders. You are dressed for the sky, not for escape. You make for the nearest tree line. Every instinct tells you to stay out of open fields. The forest offers concealment. It also offers uncertainty. Roots catch your boots. Branches scrape against your face. The silence inside the trees feels heavier than the noise of combat ever did. Every snapped twig sounds impossibly loud. Hours pass, or perhaps only one. Time becomes strangely elastic when you're alone. You avoid roads. Avoid villages. Avoid smoke rising from distant chimneys. Civilian encounters are unpredictable. Some people quietly help downed airmen despite enormous personal risk. Others immediately alerted soldiers. Fear often decided faster than loyalty. You cannot know which kind of person waits behind the next farmhouse. So you avoid all of them. Thirst arrives before hunger. Your throat feels dry from hours of breathing oxygen at altitude. The canteen hanging from your belt suddenly feels priceless. You drink sparingly. No one knows how long this journey will last. As evening approaches, the forest begins changing. Birdsong fades. Shadows lengthen. Every movement beyond the trees seems suspicious. The darkness becomes both friend and enemy. It hides you. It also hides everyone else. You find a shallow depression beneath thick brush. It isn't comfortable. It isn't dry. But it cannot easily be seen from above or from nearby paths. For the first time since leaving the aircraft, you stop moving. Only then do you notice how exhausted you really are. Your entire body aches. Your hands still smell faintly of engine oil. Your ears continue ringing from hours inside the cockpit. Sleep refuses to come. Every distant sound jolts you awake again. A barking dog, an owl, branches moving in the wind. Your mind transforms each one into approaching footsteps. You grip the pistol more tightly than necessary. It provides comfort, very little actual security. Against a patrol, it would change almost nothing. Morning brings no relief, only decisions. Continue walking. Search for friendly forces. Hide until nightfall. Every option carries risk. Every hour spent wandering increases the chance of discovery. Yet remaining still guarantees nothing either. War offers remarkably few perfect choices. Most are simply less dangerous than the others. Some pilots managed to return after days of hiding. Others were rescued by resistance networks that guided them across mountains, forests, and occupied territory. Many were captured within hours. Luck, once again, proved almost as important as courage. You eventually emerge from the trees, overlooking a narrow road. A military convoy rumbles slowly beneath you. Different uniforms, different vehicles, different language. Not yours. You remain perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. One soldier glances toward the hillside. For a terrifying second, you think he's seen you. Then the convoy continues. The engines fade into the distance. Only when the sound has completely disappeared do you finally exhale. It strikes you then how completely your world has changed. Yesterday, you ruled the sky. Today, you are hiding behind bushes, afraid to make the slightest sound. War can reverse fortunes with astonishing speed. One burst of flak, one damaged engine, one decision made thousands of feet above the earth, and an airman becomes a fugitive. Whether you eventually reach friendly lines or spend the remainder of the war behind barbed wire depends on countless factors beyond your control. But one thing has already become clear. Surviving the flight was never the end of the story. Sometimes, it was only the beginning. No pilot ever planned to become a prisoner. You planned routes, fuel consumption, escape headings, emergency procedures. But captivity? That was always something that happened to someone else. Until the morning you woke behind barbed wire. Capture is surprisingly uneventful. No dramatic speeches. No final stand. Usually, it's exhaustion. A rifle pointed in your direction. Hands raised because there is no sensible alternative. The war you've been fighting at hundreds of miles per hour suddenly slows to walking pace. Your aircraft is gone. Your weapon has been taken. Your freedom disappears just as quietly. The first days blur together. Questions, names, rank, serial number. The same information repeated again and again. Military training had prepared you for this moment. Give only what you're required to give. Nothing more. No matter how friendly the questions sound. No matter how tired you become. No matter how convincing the promises. Some interrogators relied on threats. Others relied on kindness. Experienced prisoners understood that both could serve the same purpose. Eventually, the questioning ends. A truck arrives, its wooden bed already crowded with other captured airmen. Some wear bandages. Some stare silently into the distance. A few attempt nervous conversation. Most simply watch the countryside pass by. Not because it's interesting, because none of you know where you're going. The prison camp announces itself long before you reach the gate. Watchtowers, rows of barbed wire, floodlights, fences inside fences. Every feature designed around a single idea, keeping people in. The gates open. The truck rolls forward, then closes behind you. The sound of those heavy gates shutting echoes much longer than the metal itself. For many prisoners, that sound stayed with them for the rest of their lives. Inside, everything follows routine. Barracks stand in neat rows. Gravel paths divide the compounds. Guard towers overlook every corner. The order feels strangely familiar. Military. Disciplined. Only the purpose has changed. Instead of preparing men for war, the camp exists to keep them waiting. You are issued a bunk. Thin mattress. Rough blanket. A small locker if you're fortunate. The bed isn't comfortable. But after days of uncertainty, it is at least predictable. Predictability becomes strangely valuable. Food arrives at regular hours. The quantity varies. The quality rarely does. Watery soup. Dark bread. Occasionally potatoes. Occasionally something that resembles meat. Hunger changes expectations. Meals that once seemed impossible to swallow now become the highlight of the day. You learn very quickly that the human body can adapt to almost anything. The mind takes longer. Time behaves differently inside a prison. Camp. Outside. Every day of the war brings new offensives, new victories, new defeats. Inside. Monday looks remarkably similar to Thursday. Weeks blend together. The calendar becomes more important than the clock, because every crossed-out day feels like movement, even when nothing else changes. The prisoners create routines deliberately. Morning exercise, reading, language lessons, card games, chessboards carved from scraps of wood, improvised lectures given by former teachers, engineers, doctors, and professors. Anything to occupy the mind, because idleness is dangerous. Not physically, mentally, without purpose. Days begin dissolving into one another. Pilots are particularly good at telling stories. They relive missions repeatedly. Who saw what? Who nearly collided with another aircraft? Who landed with half a wing missing? The stories grow slightly with each telling. Not because anyone intends to exaggerate. Memory simply reshapes itself over time. Eventually, everyone becomes both narrator and audience. Letters still arrive. Eventually, sometimes months after being written. A birthday card reaches you long after the birthday has passed. News of home arrives out of sequence. Someone gets married. A child is born. A neighbor moves away. The world continues without asking whether you're ready to rejoin it. That realization hurts more than expected. The hardest part isn't hunger, or boredom, or even uncertainty. It's helplessness. You know your squadron is still flying. Friends are still climbing into aircraft every dawn. The war continues exactly as before. Only now, you can do nothing except imagine it. For soldiers accustomed to constant action, doing nothing becomes its own punishment. Escape is always discussed. Always. Some plans are wildly ambitious. Others surprisingly practical. Tunnels dug beneath barracks. Forged documents. Hidden civilian clothing. Secret maps. compasses concealed inside ordinary objects. Every camp develops its own rumors, its own legends, its own impossible plans. Few succeed, many are discovered, yet the planning never truly stops. Hope is remarkably difficult to imprison. At night, the camp grows quiet. Searchlights sweep slowly across the fences. Boots crunch rhythmically along patrol routes. You lie awake listening to sounds that have become strangely familiar. Not aircraft engines, not anti-aircraft guns, just guards changing shifts. Wind rattling wire. Someone coughing in the next bunk. You almost miss the roar of the engines. Almost. Months pass. Perhaps years. Your flying skills begin fading. Small habits disappear first. Radio procedures. Emergency checklists. Tiny cockpit routines repeated thousands of times before the war. You worry about forgetting. Not because you expect to fly tomorrow. Because flying had become part of who you were. And now, every passing month quietly steals a little more of it away. One cold evening, you step outside the barracks just before lights out. Beyond the fence, the sky is perfectly clear. Stars stretch endlessly overhead. The same stars you once navigated by. The same sky you crossed countless times. Nothing about it has changed. Only your place beneath it. You realize then that captivity isn't merely the loss of freedom. It's the loss of altitude. Once, the sky belonged to you. Now, you can only look up at it through barbed wire. Every war ends. Eventually. But no one fighting inside it knows which mission will be the last. That's the cruel part. History gives battles names, dates, endings. The people living through them receive no such certainty. When you wake before dawn, it feels exactly like every other morning. The alarm sounds before sunrise. Boots hit the wooden floor. Someone yawns. Someone complains about the cold. Someone quietly folds a letter from home back into his pocket. Outside, the mechanics have already begun warming the engines. Nothing about the morning feels unusual. Yet somewhere, hundreds of miles away, politicians are discussing surrender. Generals are moving colored pins across maps. Governments are beginning to collapse. You know none of it. Your world extends only as far as today's briefing. The operations room feels oddly subdued. The target isn't as heavily defended as previous missions. Fuel shortages have grounded many enemy aircraft. Reconnaissance reports fewer anti-aircraft batteries than before. The intelligence officer mentions these facts without emotion. You notice the older pilots exchanging brief glances. Everyone senses it. The war is changing, not ending. Changing. There's a difference. A cornered enemy can still be dangerous. Sometimes, more dangerous than before. You walk toward your aircraft. The same airplane you've trusted for months. Its patched skin tells its own history. Fresh rivets, replacement panels, paint covering old repairs. A mechanic pats the engine cowling as you approach. She'll get you there. It's the same thing he said on your first operational flight. Back then, you needed reassurance. Today, you understand it was never a promise. Only hope. The engine starts with its familiar rumble. For a moment, everything feels comfortingly routine. Checklist. Instruments. Taxi. Takeoff. Your hands move almost automatically now. The nervous hesitation of your first missions has disappeared. Experience has replaced it. Not confidence. Experience. There's a difference there, too. Experienced pilots don't believe they're invincible. They simply know exactly how fragile they are. The formation climbs into the morning light. Below, the countryside glows with the soft colors of dawn. Fields shimmer beneath a thin layer of mist. Rivers catch the sunlight like polished silver. It's beautiful, painfully beautiful. You wonder how landscapes can remain so peaceful, while people continue finding new ways to destroy one another above them. The radio remains unusually quiet. No frantic warnings. No urgent course corrections. Only routine. Position reports. For nearly an hour, nothing happens. You almost begin believing today's mission might be different. Then, habit reminds you never to trust a quiet sky. The flak arrives first. It always seems to. The explosions are fewer than before, less accurate. Some batteries have run out of ammunition. Others have lost experienced crews. Even so, the shells exploding around your aircraft are no less deadly. One lucky fragment doesn't care how close the war is to ending. Enemy fighters appear late. Only a handful. Their attacks lack the coordination you've seen before. Fuel is scarce. Replacement pilots are younger. Many veterans are already gone. But desperation often replaces discipline. One fighter dives recklessly through the formation, guns blazing. Another follows close behind. The attacks are dangerous, if not particularly organized. War has worn everyone down. Both sides. You find yourself chasing one enemy aircraft across the clouds. Not aggressively, almost instinctively. For a brief moment, everything else disappears. The radio, the formation, the war. There are only two airplanes carving circles through the sky. Then the other pilot suddenly breaks away. Not because he's won. Not because you've won. Simply because both of you have survived another pass. Sometimes, that's victory enough. Hours later, the nose turns toward home. The coastline appears. Or perhaps a familiar river. A railway line you've crossed dozens of times before. Landmarks that once guided navigation now feel strangely comforting. Home isn't a place anymore. It's simply the direction where fewer people are trying to kill you. The runway comes into view. You lower the landing gear. Green lights confirm it's locked. The wheels touch the earth with a gentle bounce. You roll to a stop. The engine idles for a few moments longer before you switch it off. Silence returns. The mechanic climbs onto the wing, smiling faintly. Welcome back. 2 ordinary words. Yet they suddenly carry enormous weight. You remove your helmet slowly. The fresh air smells different somehow. Cleaner. Surrender is signed. The newspapers print enormous headlines. Church bells ring. Crowds fill city streets. People embrace complete strangers. The world celebrates because millions of people no longer have to wake fearing another air raid. Another telegram. Another goodbye. For civilians, peace arrives almost overnight. For those who fought, it takes much longer. You return to the same towns you left years earlier. The train stations are familiar. The streets are familiar. Even the smell of rain on the pavement feels familiar. But something refuses to fit. The place hasn't changed nearly as much as you have. Friends ask simple questions. What was it like? Did you ever shoot anyone? Were you scared? You search for answers. None seem large enough. How do you compress years of fear into a few polite sentences? Eventually, you stop trying. It's good to be home. People accept the answer because they want to, not because it's complete. The flying ends almost immediately. One day you're climbing into a cockpit before sunrise. The next, you're handing in your flight gear. Helmet, goggles, parachute, maps. The equipment that once determined whether you lived or died is quietly placed inside storage rooms. Thousands of military aircraft are parked wingtip to wingtip across enormous airfields. Some are sold. Some are scrapped. Many never fly again. Machines built for war suddenly have no purpose. Pilots discover that ordinary life requires entirely different skills. You no longer wake according to mission schedules. Nobody calculates your fuel. Nobody briefs you before breakfast. The routines that once structured every hour simply disappear. Freedom feels wonderful. It also feels strangely empty. The first time you hear an airplane overhead, you stop walking. Your eyes instinctively search the sky. Old habits survive longer than wars do. Even years later, many veterans could identify aircraft by the sound of their engines alone. Some never lost that ability. Sleep gradually improves, then suddenly becomes difficult again. A thunderstorm rolls across town. For one brief moment, the crack of thunder sounds remarkably like anti-aircraft fire. Fireworks on holidays send your thoughts racing backward. The mind doesn't always recognize the difference between memory and the present. Some former pilots continue flying. Commercial aviation grows rapidly after the war. Transport aircraft replace bombers. Passengers replace ammunition. Routes once crossed by fighters become peaceful airways connecting continents. The same skies that witnessed unimaginable destruction now carry families on holiday. Business travelers. Children looking excitedly through tiny windows. It feels almost impossible. Yet somehow, the sky heals faster than people do. Others never enter another cockpit. Not because they hate flying, because they remember it too clearly. The smell of aviation fuel, the vibration before takeoff, the tightening harness, the sound of an engine struggling. Certain memories never remain in the past. Sometimes, they're only waiting for a familiar sound. Reunions begin years later. Gray-haired men gather beside restored aircraft in museums and airfields. They shake hands, smile, tell stories that somehow become funnier with age. They argue over details. Which airfield had the worst coffee? Which mechanic could repair anything? Who always landed too hard? For a few precious hours, they become young pilots again. Not because they've forgotten the war, because they've remembered the people. As the decades pass, their numbers quietly grow smaller. One reunion has fewer chairs. The next, fewer voices. Eventually, someone realizes they're the oldest person in the photograph. Then, one day, the last pilot from a particular squadron stands alone beside an airplane that outlived almost everyone who flew it. History has a habit of becoming quieter, one voice at a time. Museums preserve the machines, perfectly restored. Fighters, bombers polished until they shine. Visitors admire the engineering, the powerful engines, the elegant wings. They marvel at how beautiful these aircraft look. And they are beautiful. But they were never beautiful because they carried weapons. They were beautiful because ordinary human beings climbed into them, knowing there was every chance they would never climb out again. History often remembers the aircraft. The Spitfire, the Mustang, the Messerschmitt, the Zero, the Lancaster, the B-17. The names become legends. The machines become symbols. But airplanes never felt fear. They never missed home. They never wondered whether a letter would arrive. They never watched an empty bunk and understood exactly why it remained empty. People did. Always people. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson these pilots leave behind. Courage was never the absence of fear. It was fastening the harness despite it, starting the engine despite it, taking off despite it, again and again and again, not because they believed they couldn't die, but because they believed someone had to fly. Today, the skies over Europe and the Pacific are among the busiest and most peaceful in the world. Airliners trace invisible highways once crowded with bombers and fighters. Passengers watch movies, read books, complain about delayed departures. Almost none of them realize they're crossing the same skies where thousands of young pilots once fought for every mile. Perhaps that's exactly what those pilots hoped for. Not to be remembered every day, but to leave behind a world where flying no longer meant saying goodbye as though it might be forever. So the next time you look up and see the faint white trail of an airplane disappearing across the blue sky, remember this. Someone once crossed that same sky wearing a parachute instead of a seatbelt, listening for gunfire instead of cabin announcements, wondering not when they would arrive, but whether they would arrive at all. The engines have long since fallen silent. The war is over. The clouds have drifted on. But the courage of those ordinary young pilots still echoes somewhere above us, not in the roar of their aircraft, but in the peaceful silence they helped leave behind. If you made it this far, thank you for taking this journey through one of history's most dangerous professions. It's easy to look back at World War II and focus on the machines, the fighters, the bombers, the incredible technology that filled the skies. But behind every aircraft was a person, usually someone barely old enough to rent a car today, someone who had favorite foods, a family waiting at home, dreams that had nothing to do with war. History remembers the victories, the medals, the famous aces, but most wartime pilots were never famous. They were ordinary young men asked to shoulder extraordinary burdens, climbing into fragile machines day after day with no guarantee that the next landing would ever come. Many never returned. Those who did carried memories that lasted far longer than the war itself. Their legacy isn't measured by the number of enemy aircraft they destroyed or the missions they completed. It's measured by the resilience they showed in impossible circumstances, and by the peaceful skies generations after them have been fortunate enough to inherit. If you enjoyed this documentary, consider subscribing for more immersive journeys into history, where we look beyond the headlines and explore what it truly felt like to live through the defining moments of the past. Until next time, thank you for watching, and thank you for remembering.